Thank you, Bruce, and welcome everybody. Good morning. I'm Trudy Coxe, and today we go inside the Newport mansions. We have a very special guest, Kathryn Sheehan. Kathy is the executive director of the Hart Cluett Museum, which is in Troy, New York. She is a Troy native, and Troy is an important town to us, Kathy, and we'll talk about that a little later. She has been the historian for the Rensselaer County and Troy County since 2006. She has lectured on topics that include Uncle Sam, the Underground Railroad, women's suffrage, and most recently, the Gilded Age in Troy. And I think when I read that out loud, it means the Gilded Age as a TV show, correct, Kathy?
The Gilded Age as the HBO show, as well as the Gilded Age and what was going on here during the real Gilded Age.
Well, good. We'll have to get some insights from you on filming.
Oh, yeah, it's been fun.
Kathy has presented her work on local and radio and television, and has appeared on the History Channel, PBS, C-SPAN, and Russian and Japanese network television. She resides in a historic district in downtown Troy and is the author of Architecture Worth Saving in Rensselaer County Revisited 50 Years Later. And tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, Kathy will present the lecture, Spiritualism in the Gilded Age. She will be live at Rosecliff. It is available also to people via Zoom. So if you are interested, get in touch with us via our website. And today on the radio, we welcome you, Kathy, for giving us a little bit of preview of what you're going to talk about tomorrow night. It's not the same lecture. We're going to talk broadly.
Broadly, yeah, right.
So I guess the first question that you have such an impressive resume. It's the curiosity factor. Have you ever used a Ouija board? Have you ever gone to a fortune teller? Have you ever been to a seance? These are questions that I think everybody wants to know the answer to.
I have not used a Ouija board since I was about 10 years old, when my cousin had one, and we used to, play the game back and forth. And of course, we're moving the thing back and forth all over the place. It was fun.
Yeah.
I have been to a not a seance. I've been to a medium. Been to a medium after my husband passed away, actually, and which was interesting. And I've been to kind of one of the bigger events. I'm trying to think who's the famous medium that's from Long Island Medium. It wasn't her, but it was something similar to that at the across the river at our Cohoes Music Hall, which was interesting. So
when you say interesting, did you gain any insights that were surprising and new and different that you did not expect?
No, not really. No, I don't think so. I don't think that as for when I went to the medium myself, actually my sister and I went, and it was, they said, oh yeah, no, your husband he's okay, and he knows that you'll be okay. And it was such a very general kind of a thing that wasn't anything freaky or haunty kind of sounding or anything like that. And then the one that I went to in Cohoes, I actually was surprised that the person who I knew, a person of a person who was there, and they actually had kind of called on that person and had given them some sort of information that they wouldn't have known that, which I thought was kind of interesting. So at least not that we know. You always hear a lot about these things,
Yeah.
It's the entertainment part of it, and are they a hoax? How, and as we know, this goes so far back.
Right, yeah. Well, I think
it's an interesting topic, I think, just generally.
Absolutely. And I do think that everyone has had an occurrence in their life that has seemed different and unusual, and makes one be alert to the fact that there is a presence perhaps around. And I actually do believe that.
Yeah.
So,
I do too.
And I think we've all had that experience. So you use the word freaky, and I do understand that word, but I think at a fundamental level, the world is bigger than the planet Earth. It's
Yeah.
heavenly. I'm
Right.
not using the right, it is spiritual.
Yeah,
So
it is spiritual.
that's what it is. So how and where and when did spiritualism in America begin?
Well, I think when you look at it, I mean, I think there's certainly always has been some religious overtones to it. Certainly even think all the way back even to like the Salem witch trials. You remember when the young ladies were in a frenzy and you know, they thought that was, you know, that was devil, which ended up being such a you know, a negative end of things, as opposed to what I think happens later on in the 1840s when you start hearing about what like the Fox sisters, what the Fox sisters did. You know, Margareta and I forget the other sister's name.
Hey, hey,
Yes, yes, and Catherine and Kate, and you know, they of course they fessed up later on that they were playing the game, but the essence was there. There's what I found interesting as a historian and being from this area in Troy, we are located on the Hudson River, kind of really at the headwaters of the Hudson River, about 150 miles north of New York City. And we are also the eastern terminus of the Erie Canal, and one of the main terminuses for the south terminus for the Champlain Canal. And so this was such a hotbed of an area of people moving across the state and up, you know, up the state to Canada, and really, you know, developing that area. That you see all these different kinds of groups coming in. You see people that are, you know, longing for some connectivity, and some of it branches off from traditional, for lack of a better word, traditional religions. You know, think of people that are here. You're in New England. You know, the Congregationalists and you know, the Methodists and Presbyterians, and you know, all the kind of standard religion. The Quakers. You know,
mhm,
all of
yeah.
which are here very early on in the, you know, 18th and early 19th century, and certainly very, you know, well embedded in the national story by certainly by the time of the spiritualists. So there's just, I think people were looking for something else. You know, they're looking for that kind of attachment. We start to become very mobile. It's a weird way to say that as a society, but when you think about the kind of river traffic that the canals provided, it did increase this mobility, and it allowed people who maybe had felt they wanted to have a different, they felt connected to other people. Think of like the Oneida group that was out, you know, again along the canal, Oneida, New York. You know, you start to become attracted to other people. The Shakers, you know, they come in from England here in the very late 18th century, but you know, they form these communities. And so when people are feeling that same kind of sense of belonging, those communities get larger.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And I think it provides a cover. Well, I guess I want to get dismissed right away. The negativism that
Mm.
some might have
Yeah,
towards even Ouija boards. And
right,
I say that with a little bit of humor, but I think that some might say, oh, spiritualist that must be some wild and crazy person.
right,
And yet, you know, going back to my own experience with the shaman on a very personal issue, you know, I can say, just like you did with your experience with um, whatever a medium,
right,
that if it provides with some, you knew that you were going to be okay after your
yeah,
husband's death, even though it
right,
was not a fun time.
right.
But having someone provide that solace and understanding and comfort
Yeah.
sometimes in our lives is very much needed.
Right. And I think what's interesting now, and it's funny because even I think the emails we were exchanging back and forth, it was funny, and we all do it. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but it was funny. You said interesting as Halloween is approaching, and of course everybody always takes Halloween as the dark and murky kind of a thing, and it's unfortunate that the spiritualists and all of those kind of things, mediums and everything else, start to take this dark tone. And I will, I think about, how cemetery, I look at that. It's so funny. I look at that 1848 year when Catherine and Margaretta, the Fox sisters, start, that's when everything starts happening with them. And they're, doing the tapping and the rocking and all. And so everybody's, oh my God, they're spiritualists and mediums. 1848 is an interesting time right here in Troy. We had just consecrated our Oakwood Cemetery, which was part of the rural cemetery movement. And think about early cemeteries when they were the very church burial grounds, very severe stones. They were very much connected to that. Your destiny is set for you. You're going to go to heaven. You're going to go to hell. It was all sphere to sphere. Now we start into the rural cemetery movement where death becomes very much a part of life. It is just that part of the cycle. And it's reflected in these beautiful park cemeteries, Mount Auburn in Massachusetts, which of course isn't all that far from you, from all of you here in New England. And they're the first. And we're about like the third. I think Albany Rural is next, and then we're right behind that. And there's a peace and a tranquility that is associated now with these beautifully landscaped gardens.
Right.
And they are gardens. And so that you can come and commune in a much more personal and spiritual way than you would have going into the village burial ground, the church burial ground that was set up. That's why they put beautiful benches. I mean, think of all this amazing architecture that comes out of things that were first maybe introduced as cemetery. Beautiful iron, I was thinking the beautiful iron benches. And then the iconography of these gorgeous headstones as well. Paying homage to the person. Now, people still had you had your family plot, and you could still create your fence around it. You could do all those kinds of things, but you also then could personalize it. What did that person do in their lifetime that you wanted people to know about in death? And since we have, or the life cut short, think about, what was one of the symbols of the tree with the cut branch, that it was a young person that died, or the lambs for infants and young children, which we knew unfortunately death was very much a part of life. And I think that's one of the things when, I'm doing tours or things like that, it's like, we have so distanced ourselves from death than they did in the 19th century. So it isn't strange for people then to, you took care of your family, you took care of your own body. And I think we're trying to get a little bit back with hospice. You could have home hospice care, and people are, again, maybe are connecting more. And maybe that will also help not to have that kind of fear of, obviously nobody wants to want to die, but that fear that's associated with it, and that darkness that comes with it. And I think, and that's always that's where I think I love talking about this, because it really was a community centered thing for solace, not to conjure up evil spirits or things like that. So I always get, when we have a lot of, there's a lot of people that come, and you probably have that at your museum as well, where people want to come and they want to do they want to set up and they have the lights, like, oh, this really creepy thing. No, that's not going to happen here. And I can tell you, all the people in our historic house that we have, which is older than your Newport mansion, ours is from 1827. Many, many people died in that house. And nobody was murdered, nobody horribly tragic death. There was, unfortunate illnesses, or people just died from old age. So, and they're all part of the spirits that are part of that house, but it's not creepy. And so I think and I think in the 19th century, I don't think people felt that it was creepy either. And all of the groups, no matter, which spiritualists, or the association of the churches, and some of the other famous people that got involved, they were just trying to capture, stay in touch with that sphere, and I always feel like, I like you, I think we're a bigger than that. I always feel like, okay, they're just in some other dimension that we can't see, for whatever. We can feel them, we can sense them, but They're just not like physically in front of us. You know?
Right. I actually probably should ask you to define spiritualism. Is it a feeling? Is it a religion? Is it a organized activity? I know the answer,
Well,
but I want you to
Well,
talk.
yeah, no, I mean, I think it was a feeling that turns into an organized activity and not, spiritualists did end up kind of creating their own, and that's not, it's so strange. I think I wouldn't call it a religion, but I guess it is kind of in that way.
Would
They're
you
groups that
introduce
could
yourself?
be,
Would you introduce yourself as a spiritual? Well, I'm an Episcopalian. I'm a Catholic. I'm a spiritualist. You
right.
wouldn't go that far, or would you?
No. Probably not today, you wouldn't, but maybe no, I don't. And I think there was enough reticence in the 19th century that I don't think they would. Which I think is interesting, why they landed out in the Finger Lakes area and going out into the middle of New York State. Places if you've ever driven across the thruway, it's just like miles and miles of beautiful rolling farmlands, and you could have communities and no one's going to bother you out there, and so you can feel comfortable with your own community, much as the Shakers did, or the Quakers, or any other religious group that always was finding solace in where they were located, and then could grow without fear of retribution.
So there were spiritualist communities.
There were, yeah.
How large would a spiritualist community or name one, or and
Well, you had, I mean, and it's formed later. You have the spiritualist movement catches on by the 1850s. Certainly after the Civil War, it really takes hold. And again, I think we have to think about what was the big picture here. I mean, we just
right.
went through an enormous war where thousands and thousands of people died, and
Mhm.
so there's Mary Todd Lincoln is an example of a you know, of a she contacted spiritualists. She believed, because she wanted to not only contact Abraham Lincoln after he shot, but their son, who had also
Right.
died earlier from that. So she's kind of one of the more
Famous.
famous people associated with the spiritualist movement. But they actually, it takes a little longer. In the 1890s is when the National Spiritualist Association is founded. And it's founded in Chicago, which I found really interesting. 1893, what else is going on in Chicago but the World's Fair?
World's
The
Fair.
World's
Yes.
Fair is going on. So there's all of this, it's never just one thing, it's like these spokes on a wheel. Why in Chicago? Well, look at all these new things all these new inventions are going on, and all this other stuff is going. And you talk about how are we contacting people. We have 2 years before that. It's 1891. The Ouija board is now has a patent.
Okay.
So so you have this Ouija board now. So they're selling them now
Mhm.
at the fair. Your people have, again, this movement from the east, the Northeast and mid-Atlantic states out to the west. The Midwest is now this, burgeoning big city in Chicago, the White City. You've
Right.
Post and Daniel Burnham building these, incredible structures and just thousands and thousands of people coming out to the World's Fair in ways that they couldn't before. Not only are they coming out in the canal, they're coming out in the railroads. So it's just like the ultimate. It'd be like the huge Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is where you see new things. This is where you get to sample what are the new inventions, what are the what, and people gravitate towards these things. So I always thought that was really interesting, that, oh yeah, and this spiritualist church, 1893. Now ultimately they end up back in New York, similar into the area near where the Fox sisters actually lived. Oh my gosh.
I'm going to ask you to tell us the Fox story, because not everybody knows about Kate and Maggie Fox. And maybe I should interrupt you and ask you to go back to
Okay.
earlier part of the century, 18, what, 40s or something?
1848. Yeah.
1848. So who were these two scandalous women?
Scandalous. Well, they were young ladies. There were these two young sisters. They were raised Methodists, actually. And they were out in, in Western New York and in Hydesville, New York. And they thought their house was reputed to be haunted. And so they started making these, cracking their knuckles and their joints and making these rapping noises. And other people in the neighborhood start hearing about these things. And
I mean, they're doing this to frighten the ghosts away or the spirits away. Is that?
I don't know if they're really doing it to be frightened and to scare them. I think they just thought that it would be fun to conjure them all up, So yeah, it's like, well, yes, it could be haunted. And they did say that there were they thought that the house had been haunted by someone who'd been murdered in the house, which so we didn't, they continued on with this rapping. But again, I think the pieces of the puzzle were there for them to become successful in this story. People were like globbing onto this, like, huh, are we really, can we talk to the dead? Can we talk to the spirits? And again, 1848, same thing. Not only because as the cemetery movement, we also had just gone through some severe cholera epidemics and yellow fever and typhoid, and particularly cholera. Cholera epidemics in the 1830s and or 40s were, they were cyclical. And so you had many people that died, and a lot of people, again, traveling the Erie Canal as they were coming in, it spread. You just, and so you have a loss. There's another big loss of life that happened. Not as much as during the Civil War, of course, but this happened, and then it affected, and so many of those affected younger people. Which was difficult. So, but they jumped on the bandwagon. They end up over in Rochester for a little bit, and then they start advertising themselves as mediums, and they go on the circuit. And what happens? They come to Troy. Troy, and that's how I kind of had heard about the Fox sisters, but we found these ledgers and things announcement. Here's the Fox sisters coming and spending 3 full days we had this huge opera house in Troy. It was Rand's Opera House. Unfortunately, the building is no longer there, and sell out audiences to come in. So people are, they're intrigued by these two sisters who are now, claiming to be mediums and can contact things. And it was to them, and it was a huge hoax.
And so people are showing up at the opera house to see these two young women who are claimed mediums. Are they coming with their family problems, their question? What are they doing at this event?
I think we're pretty much, of course, they didn't elaborate that much in the newspapers about, did they go into the audience where they did, but so it was, they were there. They would say, yes, they were there for the demonstrations by the Fox sisters. So they must have, did the Fox sisters bring some plants in the audience, or did they actually, try and they have people came up and were just, feeding them information, and then they were taking it and making it work for the raps of the taps and the raps and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
You make a very good point that there seems to be an incline of interest in spiritualism immediately following some disaster in which many lives are lost, whether it's the Civil War, whether it's the cholera epidemic. That all makes such perfect sense because people in a community, if they have gone through something horrible, all of us are weighed down by a dark cloud. Right. And most people during a period like that would be looking for something that would provide them with optimism and hope.
Yeah.
So that would explain why Kate and Maggie Fox, whether they were real or not, they were needed.
They were needed. right.
they were accepted and no one probably wanted. How were they discovered to not be real?
Oh, she admitted it.
Okay.
Yeah, Maggie, she admits it. Not till like 1880, something like that. They managed to do this off and on. And again, most of these things, they ebb and flow, and they wax and wane, so to speak. But yeah, she's 1880. She fessed up and said that it was a hoax. But by that time, spiritualism is deeply rooted now, in that intervening 30 years. It is deeply rooted. And again, we have to think about the waves of migration came through, and particularly again the going out the Erie, particularly through the Erie Canal, and that's why you've got families that left from their homes in Ireland and England, Scotland, and mostly Northern European at that point, coming through, never to see either their families again. They're looking for stability. They're looking for peace. They're maybe, again, attaching to these religions. They called it the burnover district because it was scorched with the fervor, the religious fervor. And that's way back, it goes back even before that. So, the Methodist conferences that start, which ultimately, we have a Methodist conference here. Was one in Round Lake, about 20 miles north of us here. Think about the one out on Martha's Vineyard. There was a big demand, the meeting camps.
Yes,
And
right.
again, the geography of this area suited to wanting to create spaces where they could feel that they could practice their spiritualism. They could practice being comfortable being a Quaker. They could practice being comfortable being Mormons. Same time, 1848, Joseph Smith. He's received he gets from the tablet that's out near Palmyra, along there. So all these, these kind of religions that we don't even think about anymore, that are just more mainstream, were pretty new at that time. And so you had people, whoever it was, and the person, I think, whether it was the Fox sisters or whether it's oh gosh, I'm trying to think of who one of the big Methodist ministers were. Oh, off the top of my head. Or Joseph Smith, they're however they were preaching, something grabs on. We hang on to that, and that's
Right.
and that's how these grow. And to have these beautiful areas. The spiritualists ended up in Lilydale, New York, which wasn't far. Matter of fact, they even moved at one point. They moved the Fox sisters home from Hydesdale, where they were in New York, to Lilydale. It ultimately burned down, but the house burned down. It's not there anymore. But they even moved the house there because whether people still, even though it represented that spiritualist movement, and that launches into other things, because not only are you now spiritually healing your soul, now we want spiritualists to heal our body as well. So phrenologists you hear phrenologists. We had a woman who was a clairvoyant physician. So she felt she could go in and be able to read what was wrong with your body by capturing that. You have manumists, I always say it wrong. It's learning to read the energy of your body. Homeopathy,
Uh-huh.
homeopathy, which has been around for centuries and centuries, and I mean England's still its most thing, and it was here. We even had homeopathic hospitals for a while, until kind of really Western traditional medicine by like 1900 really starts going, they start poo-pooing the whole homeopathic thing, but it's still entrenched.
It's still around.
I use homeopathy all the time.
Yeah. Very,
Um,
very.
yeah.
What?
So and they go hand in hand. It goes hand in hand, which I really find fascinating. We're healing the body and you're healing the mind. Which way are you doing it? Are we going to be able to heal the center, and then the body will heal itself?
Let's go back to the 1840s, 50s, 60s, even later. What was the reaction of the general public towards someone who was an admitted spiritualist? Were they well accepted into the average community, or were they looked at as blasphemous people or threatening people or weird people?
I think they were probably around here because there was so much change of things. They were kind of looked around as kind of quirky people. I don't think they necessarily felt threatened by them. Some ads in newspapers and things like local would say, "Oh, no, they're just quacks. If they're just quacks." And then, you're depending on, we had many newspapers covering all sorts of, political spectrum and either, one way or the other. And I was like, "Oh no, they're fine." But I think they looked at it somewhat humorously that, but yeah, don't take them seriously.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought we read here at the office that though when spiritualist leaders spoke out on behalf of suffrage or women's rights, they were often treated very badly. Now, maybe that's because they were in favor of women's rights, not because they were a spiritualist. Which would
Right.
you say?
Well, I think that was probably true. It was more for women's rights. What's interesting here is that we were such a kind of progressive town that it was there. I think that's why so many people came here and spoke and think, because they knew they weren't going to be met with a lot of resistance about it, which is kind of interesting, even though the county suffrage voted it down twice before it's
I'm sorry, it voted what?
voted suffrage down twice before it passed. But they were excited when people like said, when the Fox sisters or the early suffragettes, Victoria Woodhull. Again, we had local women. Well, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she went to the Troy Female Seminary. Some of our early major suffragettes were all here in this area. So I think there was a lot more tolerance here for that. Not always. There were times when, there would be people that were, we had a Mary Entwistle, who was a clairvoyant physician, and she kept trying to get her being she wanted to be part of the Rensselaer County Medical Society, and they kept refusing her, and they just, this is not real medicine. And she would have all these, testimonials from her patients and things like that. It didn't stop her from practicing. She practiced for years, as did her husband. And was interesting, she was a cousin of John Wilkes Booth, which is even stranger than
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So they tolerated it. So I think we had a higher tolerance rating, maybe area than going into other areas of the country.
Yeah. So
and I think New England, I think was particularly conservative. I mean, again, think about how far back, you've got a very strong Puritan ethic that's not going away that fast.
So they were escaping to the western
To
part.
the west, right? We're the west.
To New York.
We're the west. Come to New York. We're the west. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can answer this, but you've got some prominent believers, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Doyle.
Tell us a little bit about him. And then the second question I want to ask is, a rumor here in Newport is that Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt was a spiritualist.
He was interested in spiritualists for healing. From a medical perspective, which was interesting. Yeah, he was looking for healing mediums, and from whatever physical ailments. He probably had the gout or something, given the given the size of him. Who knows? I don't know that, so I shouldn't say that. But yeah, that was what his interest in. Thomas Edison is an interesting spiritualist, because he was taking it not from the emotional end of things. He was looking at science, and of course the man, he really he felt that science, not Ouija boards, was the way to uh, channel into the spiritualists movement, which was interesting. One of the other ones, I think, like Mary Todd Lincoln, Queen Victoria, we are following all things British, all things British. And Queen Victoria, after Albert's death, her long lost love, she hired mediums to come into the castle to try and keep in contact with her husband. So there was that. I think when you have people like Queen Victoria, gives it a certain cachet that hey, if Queen Victoria has a if it's okay with her, then it should be okay for us across the pond. Everybody was following either French, and Arthur Conan Doyle was. Yeah, I think he was another. He was a spiritualist, but I'm trying to think it was from a medical end, or gosh, I can't remember now off the top of my head.
Well, yeah, some of the interesting women. Well, the point that I wanted to make is that it seems sometimes that spiritualism goes hand in hand with political activism.
Mm-hmm.
So would you tell us a little bit about Amanda Britt Spence and the speech that she gave in Boston?
That one I can't.
Well, my notes say that she gave a speech in Boston supporting the equality of the sexes in 1859.
Okay.
And I don't know if she was badly treated because of that speech, but that was probably a controversial topic. So put the spiritualism aside, that's a new idea. What about a woman named Laura Cuppy, who was a suffragist?
I've heard of Laura Cuppy. I was thinking more of a Victoria Woodhull.
Yeah, tell us a little bit. She ran for president.
She ran for president in 1862. Yeah, she ran for president, and but she very early on. Now you think by the time of 1870, so she would have come in and been raised as a young woman, and then in that 1840s period where she would have started to have heard about the spiritualists, but she felt that she could get special guidance and protection from the surrounding spirits. So I mean, she had a great run of it. I mean, she was a brilliant woman. So her beliefs gave her her own whether worked or not for her. I think it gave her a sense of self-confidence that in going into obviously areas that were not controlled by women in any way, shape, or form at that time.
I mean, women couldn't even vote then, so good for her for stepping forward.
They couldn't own property. They couldn't, there were so many that you couldn't do, that they couldn't do. It was, it was pretty amazing that she really was really an extraordinary woman. We had a woman by the name of Caroline Gilkey Rogers, who was a local suffragette here, who went on to go on into the Northeast. She went to New York City, did a lot of suffrage, went to Washington. She was on the circuit with the national big people like the Susan B. Anthony's and the rest, and the Victoria Woodhulls. And she also had a firm belief of guidance by her spirits. So so I think that it's these women are so dynamic that it's they pull an inner strength from something, and that's what they pulled it in from, and if they're I just think I think it's fascinating that if they felt threatened, if people felt threatened by it. So, which is,
tell me a little bit
putting
about
our 21st century perspectives on that, of course, but
so the National Association of Spiritualists is founded in the 1890s.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how that happened, who was involved, what were their aims, what did they achieve, what could they brag about as their accomplishments?
Yeah,
we have about 3 minutes left.
They're the
So I
ones
know
that
this is
say
the 10-minute answer.
the 10-minute answer. Yeah, in 1893, and in Chicago, so they're over there in Chicago, Illinois, again during the fair, and they really wanted to establish distinguish genuine mediumship um, from fraudulence. So it's like, if you're going to join the National Spiritualist Church, you have to prove to us that you are, legit, to do
True
that.
believer, yeah.
A true believer, right?
Right.
Carl Scott, she was one of the larger of the principal members. They created a declaration of their principles, and they're an interesting, they believe, they have this 9 affirmations. A lot of it was too, they were interested, they were very much in Unitarianism. Think of the Unitarian Church,
Mhm.
Which has this kind of holistic, kind of God is everywhere kind of thing,
Right.
without
Broader.
broader.
Yeah.
God in the broad sense, not as in deities. They believe, they were very much into nature, that whole, as we were talking about before, where the life death spiritual cycle is very much informed by how nature is. So they were certainly watching the cycles of nature going around the sun. I mean, which I think is interesting too, because you look at Native Americans. I mean, how do you get to be more of a spiritualist
Absolutely.
than Native Americans?
Right. And so many
Right? And so they're,
so many
channeling that.
movements,
Yeah.
and so many movements today go back to environmentalists quote Native Americans and their philosophy. That's what drives so many environmental activists forward.
Right.
This hope that
Yeah.
we have 2 more minutes. I want to ask you if you, where is spiritualism today in general? There's not an organized group like there was in the 1890s, but I think it exists.
Oh, I think absolutely. And it exists in many different formats. I mean, you have practicing mediums that are around. You also have people that are, it's more of, I mean, think of the stores that are around in, gosh, every community. We've got tons of them around here. They're selling crystals and things like that, to kind of balance you, I guess, in that way. So yeah, it's not, I don't, it's not like a religion in that regard. Yeah, there's still all sorts of different formats,
But you're so right.
and
It
then
has
again, in
become
religion too.
commercial, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
And there is not the stigma.
No.
If
Oh
you are
gosh.
seen in one of those shops, you're not considered to be
Yeah.
something odd.
Yeah.
I
No.
think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and if anything, I mean, we've looked at, I mean, I was just thinking of like talking about like the crystals, again, they look at, the energy,
Yes.
from different things. And now that's pretty mainstream. I mean, there's a lot of things that come out of this movement. They're just mainstream, and crystals is the one that pops to the top of my head,
Right.
of, stones, and, channel your positive energy,
Yeah. And talked about it. I mean, there's not a day of the week that you don't read a newspaper article advising you on how to center in on your spirit to move
Right.
forward and
Yeah.
achieve success, or
Right.
lose weight, or
Right.
do great
Well,
things.
think about yoga. People do
Yeah.
yoga every day. That's the
Yeah.
centering of pulling all your spheres together, and that's a form of the spiritualists, as as well.
Well, I can't wait. This is going to be a fantastic lecture tomorrow
Oh,
night.
I can't wait to
I
see everybody.
I hope that if you have not yet signed up, you can sign up by going to the newportmansions.org website and look at the section on lectures. And if you cannot be in Newport, you can hear Kathy speak, and you can later hear her speak again because we will tape it. you can hear her speak via Zoom. So Kathy, I think you're going to be a hit tomorrow night. It's such a fascinating topic. It sort of hits right to the pit of everyone's stomach, whether they want to admit it or not. And I thank you. And next time, maybe tomorrow night at the lecture, you could talk a little bit about HBO being in Troy, New York, and
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Gilded Age.
Well, we
We'd
may
love
have
to hear
some,
that.
maybe some of our friends will be there since they're filming out there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true. So
yeah.
thank you so much. We look forward to hearing you live in person at Rosecliff, 6 o'clock tomorrow night. Thank you,
Thank you so
Kathy.
much. Thank you. See you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.